I never thought I'd have to choose between my brother and my wife. One RSVP, one missing name, and suddenly the room smelled like old wounds and fresh fireworks. This ain't some soap opera. It's my life. And tonight, everything comes to a head. Stick with me. You're gonna want to hear what I found out under the carpet. The invitation felt heavy in my hand, heavier than a piece of thick, creamy cardstock should. It had arrived in a smaller envelope tucked inside a larger one, the kind of fancy layered affair that screams, "We spent a fortune on these." The calligraphy was immaculate, all elegant swirls and sharp, confident lines of gold ink. Mr. Alex Carter. I smiled. My little brother Mark was finally tying the knot. I pictured him, goofy grin and all, standing at the altar, and a warmth spread through my chest. He and I had been through everything together. This was a big day, a huge day. I slid my thumb under the wax seal, a custom M and E for Mark and Emily, and pulled out the main card. The details were all there. The date, the time, the ridiculously picturesque vineyard an hour out of town. Classic Emily. She had a taste for the theatrical. I scanned the lines, looking for the RSVP card, already mentally blocking out the weekend. I found it tucked behind a sheet of delicate tissue paper. "We have reserved one seat in your honor." My eyes scanned it again. One seat. I chuckled, thinking it was a typo, one of those online templates that defaults to a single guest. I turned the main invitation over in my hand, my brain catching up to the weirdness of it. Mr. Alex Carter. Just my name. Not Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Not Alex and Lisa Carter. Just me. Alone. It was like a sudden, sharp intake of breath. The air in the room felt thin. I flipped the envelope back over, running my finger over the embossed lettering, as if the missing ink of my wife's name would somehow magically appear. But it wasn't there. It just wasn't. My heart didn't just drop. It plummeted, like a stone, kicked off a cliff, and the silence in our quiet kitchen suddenly felt deafening. What does that even mean? To understand how a single piece of paper could feel like a declaration of war, you need to understand my family. We weren't the kind to have screaming matches at Thanksgiving. We were worse. We were the kind that smiled, passed the gravy, and then spent the car ride home dissecting every passive-aggressive comment. We dealt in silence, in things left unsaid. My brother Mark and I were the exception, or so I thought. We were classic brothers. We fought over video games, covered for each other when we broke curfew, and stood shoulder to shoulder against the world. He was my best man, and I was supposed to be his. Our bond felt like one of the few solid things in a family built on shifting sands. My wife, Lisa, she's different. She's not a silence person. If something's wrong, she wants to talk about it, loudly if necessary. She's passionate and honest to a fault, which I love, but which my family, especially my mother, has always found a little jarring. They prefer pleasantries. Lisa prefers the truth. You can see how that might cause friction. There had been small things over the years, little cracks in the porcelain smile of our family gatherings. I remember one Christmas, 2 years ago, my mom made a comment about Lisa's choice to go back to school for her master's instead of focusing on starting a family. Mom said it with a smile, something like, "It's so wonderful you're still chasing your dreams at your age." Lisa just smiled right back and said, "It's so wonderful you had yours, and I get to have mine too." The room went quiet for about 5 seconds, which in our family is the equivalent of a nuclear bomb going off. Mark had kicked my foot under the table and given me a look that said, "Smooth it over." So I did. I changed the subject, made a dumb joke, and we all pretended it didn't happen. We swept it under the rug with all the other little dust bunnies of resentment. But looking back, I realized the rug was getting pretty lumpy. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're the only one in the room who can see the giant tripping hazard of unspoken history that everyone else is expertly stepping over? This invitation felt different though. This wasn't a dust bunny. This was a landmine. This was a deliberate, calculated move. Excluding a spouse from a wedding invitation isn't a typo, it's a statement. My hands were shaking a little as I pulled out my phone. I had to talk to him. I had to hear his voice. I scrolled to his name, Mark, and hit call. It rang twice, and then he picked up. "Hey man, got a sec?" I tried to keep my voice light, casual, as if I were just calling to chat. There was a pause on his end. Not a long one, but long enough for me to notice. "Yeah, what's up?" he said. His voice was flat. Not the usual cheerful, "What's happening, big bro?" It was icy. "Just got the invite, man. Looks amazing. That vineyard is top-notch." I started, trying to butter him up before I dropped the bomb. "Yeah, Emily's got good taste," he replied, still with that weird, detached tone. "Listen," I said, deciding to just rip the Band-Aid off. "I think there might be a typo on the RSVP. It just has my name on it. Lisa's isn't there." The silence that followed was so complete, I thought the call had dropped. I could hear faint music in the background, like he was in a store or a car. "Mark, you there?" I asked. "Yeah," he finally said, his voice low. "It's not a typo, Alex." And then he delivered the line that turned this whole thing from a simple question into a full-blown mystery. "There's something you don't know." His words hung in the air between us, thick and heavy like smoke. "Something I don't know? What are you talking about, Mark? It's a wedding invitation. You don't invite a man and not his wife. That's not how this works." My voice was starting to rise, the forced calm from moments before completely gone, replaced by a sharp edge of disbelief. I could hear him sigh on the other end, a long, drawn-out sound of pure exhaustion, like he'd been dreading this call for weeks. "Look, Alex, it's complicated," he said, and the vagueness of it just poured gasoline on the fire. "Complicated? My wife's name is missing from your wedding invitation. Uncomplicated for me." I was pacing my kitchen now, the beautiful, heavy cardstock sitting on the counter like an accusation. "It's just, we had to make some tough cuts. The venue is smaller than we wanted, the budget is tight, you know how it is." The excuses were so flimsy, so transparent, I almost laughed. This was my brother, the guy who just last year dropped $3,000 on a weekend trip to Vegas because he felt like it. He wasn't cutting his own brother's wife from the guest list to save $100 on a plate of chicken. "Don't insult my intelligence, Mark. This isn't about money, and you know it. What is going on?" He was quiet for a moment. I could practically hear the wheels turning in his head, trying to find another lie that would stick. "It's not a big deal," he finally mumbled. "Not a big deal?" I nearly shouted into the phone. "My wife, your sister-in-law, is being deliberately uninvited from your wedding, and you're telling me it's not a big deal?" Just then, I heard the front door open. Lisa was home. My heart sank. I turned my back, lowering my voice, hoping she wouldn't hear the panic in my tone. "Mark, you have to fix this," I whispered urgently. "Whatever this is, it's insane." "I can't," he said, his voice firming up a little. And that's when I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision. I hung up the phone without another word and stood there, staring at the granite countertop, my mind racing. I felt Lisa's arms wrap around me from behind, her chin resting on my shoulder. "Tough day?" she asked softly. I turned around and looked at her. Her smile was tired but genuine, her eyes full of that warmth that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. And in that moment, the thought of telling her, of watching that warmth get snuffed out, was physically painful. I took a deep breath. "The invitation for Mark's wedding came," I said, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. Her face lit up. "Oh, finally! I was wondering when we'd get that. Is it gorgeous? Let me see." She moved past me, her eyes scanning the counter until they landed on the gold-trimmed card. She picked it up, her expression one of pure excitement. I watched her face as she read it. I saw the exact moment the joy drained away, like water slipping through her fingers. Her smile faltered, then disappeared entirely, her brow furrowed in confusion. She turned the card over, then the envelope, just like I had. Her movements were slow, deliberate. When she looked up at me, her eyes were wide with a question she didn't seem to want to ask. "It's just your name," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I could only nod. The betrayal that washed over her face was a punch to my gut. She didn't get angry, she didn't yell, she just got quiet. A deep, heavy quiet that was so much worse than shouting. She placed the invitation back on the counter as if it were contaminated and wrapped her arms around herself. "Oh," was all she said. The silence in our house for the next hour was a living thing. It was in the way she moved around the kitchen, her feet making no sound. It was in the way she stared at her plate of food without taking a bite. The question hung between us, unasked but screaming, "Will you go without me?" I couldn't stand it anymore. I called Mark back. This time he answered on the first ring. "What?" he snapped. "I told Lisa," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "She's devastated, Mark. You owe us an explanation. A real one. No more crap about the budget." He was silent for a long beat, and then he sighed, a sound of defeat. "Look, it wasn't my call, all right? The invite list, it got trimmed." That was it. That was the turning point. He was admitting it was a deliberate cut. "Trimmed? You trimmed my wife? What the hell does that even mean?" I demanded. I could hear him talking to someone in the background, his voice muffled. Then he came back on the line, and what he said next sent a chill down my spine. Emily didn't want any drama. He said it so casually, like he was talking about the weather. Drama? What drama? Lisa wasn't drama. She was the least dramatic person I knew. What in God's name was he talking about? Drama? What drama? The question exploded out of me. Lisa doesn't do drama. Your fiancé, on the other hand, once sent back a salad 3 times because the croutons were aggressively square. Don't talk to me about drama. I was angry now, a hot, rolling anger that was quickly replacing the confusion. On the other end of the line, Mark stammered. It's not like that. It's from before." Before what? The dawn of time? I pressed him, but he was a wall. He gave me nothing but vague circular answers about keeping the peace and making sure Emily had a perfect stress-free day. It was like talking to a politician. Every word was designed to sound like an answer while saying absolutely nothing. After another 5 minutes of this verbal merry-go-round, I hung up, more furious than ever. I went back into the living room where Lisa was sitting on the couch, staring into space. I told her what Mark had said. The words, "Emily didn't want any drama," landed in the quiet room with a thud. Lisa just shook her head slowly, a look of profound hurt on her face. "But I love Emily," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought we were friends. I was so excited to help her with the wedding planning. What did I do?" That was the question, wasn't it? What had she done? And more importantly, why didn't I know about it? I spent the rest of the night with a knot in my stomach the size of a fist. After Lisa fell into a restful sleep, I stayed up, my mind racing. I started digging. My first call was to my mom. If anyone was the keeper of the family's secret history, it was her. "Mom," I said, trying to sound casual, "got Mark's invitation. A little weird that Lisa's name wasn't on it, right?" Her pause was infinitesimal, but I caught it. "Oh, honey, I'm sure it was just an oversight. You know how hectic wedding planning is." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it made my skin crawl. She knew. Of course she knew. I pushed a little harder, mentioning my conversation with Mark and the whole drama comment. Her voice immediately tightened. "Well, you know how sensitive Emily can be. And Lisa, she can be a bit direct sometimes. Maybe something got lost in translation." Another non-answer. It was like the entire family had attended a masterclass in evasion. Frustrated, I hung up and opened my laptop. I started scrolling through old family photos on social media, looking for, I don't even know what, a clue, a sign. I went back 6 months, 8 months, a year. Everything seemed normal. Pictures from birthdays, holidays, all smiling faces. But then I saw it. A picture from my cousin's engagement party about 10 months ago. It was a group shot. My mom, my dad, Mark, Emily, me, Lisa, and a few cousins. Everyone was smiling, except for 2 people. Emily was staring off to the side, her smile tight and forced. And Lisa was looking directly at her, but her expression wasn't smiling. It was confrontational. My heart started beating faster. I zoomed in on the photo. What had happened that night? I remembered it being a normal, boring family party. We ate, we drank, we left. Nothing stood out. Or had I just missed it? Was I that oblivious? I switched from photos to messages. I started scrolling through the family group chat, a digital minefield of birthday wishes and bad memes. I went back, month by month, searching for Lisa's name. And then I found something. About 9 months ago, the day after that engagement party, there was a flurry of messages between my mom, Emily, and my Aunt Carol. Then silence from the main chat for about a week. After that week, the chat picked up again, but looking at the member list, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Lisa was no longer in the group. She'd been quietly removed. I racked my brain. I didn't even remember her mentioning it. Had she noticed? Or had it been so subtle, so slick that it just slipped by? My suspicion was turning into a cold, hard rage. They had been icing her out for months, right under my nose. When did you stop digging for clues and start defending the people you love? For me, that moment was now. I texted my best friend Aaron. He's my cousin, but more like a brother. He's the family Switzerland, the one everyone talks to. Aaron, I need you to be honest with me. What happened with Lisa and Emily last year? Something at your engagement party. He replied almost instantly. Dude, you don't know? My stomach twisted. Know what? The 3 little dots indicating he was typing felt like an eternity. Then the message came through. It was a screenshot of a text that had been sent and then deleted from a side chat he was in with Mark. The message was from Mark to another cousin, and it named Lisa. The words burned on my screen. I don't know what we're going to do. Emily is in tears. Lisa completely cornered her tonight and called her a shallow, gold-digging fraud in front of everyone. The words on the screen blurred. Shallow, gold-digging fraud. It didn't sound like Lisa at all. Lisa was direct, yes. She could be blunt, but she wasn't cruel. She wouldn't say something that vicious, especially not at a party, in front of family. It felt wrong, fabricated. My mind reeled back to that night at Aaron's party. I tried to play it back in my head, frame by frame. I remembered laughing with my uncle by the grill. I remembered Lisa and Emily talking by the patio door. Remembered them laughing. Or had I imagined that? Was I rewriting history to fit the narrative I wanted? The screenshot felt like a key, unlocking a door to a room I never even knew existed in my own house. A room where everyone had been gathered, whispering about my wife, while I was left standing in the hallway, oblivious. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. I needed to look my mother in the eye. I found her in the garden, trimming her roses, the picture of suburban tranquility. I showed her the screenshot. I didn't say a word, just held out the phone. She glanced at it, and for a split second, a flicker of panic crossed her face before the calm maternal mask slipped back into place. "Oh, that," she said, turning back to her flowers, snipping a dead blossom with a sharp click of her shears. "It was all just a big misunderstanding. A lot of wine, high emotions. You know how these things are." A misunderstanding? This was the story they had all agreed on? "Mom, the text says Lisa called Emily a gold digger. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a character assassination. Did you hear her say it?" She hesitated, her hands stilling. "Well, no, not with my own ears, but Emily was very upset. And Lisa has made comments before about the money Emily's family has. That was a low blow and a lie. Lisa came from a working-class family and was proud of it. She'd made one comment once, years ago, about how it must be nice not to worry about student loans. That was it. And my mother had stored that little comment away like a weapon, waiting for the right moment to use it. I left my mom's place with a sick feeling in my stomach and drove straight to Emily's bridal boutique. If I was going to get the truth, I needed to go to the source. I found her surrounded by mountains of white tulle, looking every bit the blushing bride-to-be. When she saw me, her smile was brittle. "Alex, what a surprise." I cut right to the chase. "Emily, we need to talk about why my wife isn't invited to our brother's wedding." Her face hardened. "Your brother? You mean my future husband?" The possessiveness in her voice was telling. She launched into her version of the story. It was dramatic and tear-filled. According to her, Lisa hadn't just called her a gold digger, she'd done it during the toast. She'd apparently pulled Emily aside, accused her of trapping Mark, of only being with him for his future inheritance. The story grew more elaborate with every telling. It was a freight train of accusations, and I felt like I was tied to the tracks, watching it barrel down on my life, on my past. The two versions, my mom's casual dismissal and Emily's soap opera, didn't line up. They were different shades of the same lie, customized to cause the most damage. I was standing there, listening to this woman systematically destroy my wife's reputation, and I realized a horrifying truth. They had picked their sides months ago, and I was on the wrong one. Is one person's truth worth tearing a family apart? I stood there in that sea of white dresses, looking at my future sister-in-law's perfectly composed, tear-streaked face, and I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that nothing she was saying felt true. As I was leaving, a storm of confusion and anger raging inside me, my mother called. "I need to see you," she said, her voice strained. I met her at a nearby coffee shop. She looked older, tired. The fight had gone out of her. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," she admitted, stirring her latte with a shaky hand. Emily was upset that night, and I took her side. I told Mark he needed to support his fiancée. I told him it would be easier if Lisa just wasn't around for a while. There it was, a confession. She hadn't just known, she had been an architect of the entire situation. She had quietly sided with Emily months ago, nurturing this grievance, letting it fester until it had become toxic enough to poison a wedding. I felt a profound sense of betrayal, deeper than anything I had felt from Mark or Emily. This was my own mother. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "You have to understand, Alex. A wedding is a delicate thing. I was just trying to protect the peace." "You didn't protect the peace, Mom," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "You just chose a different war." As I got up to leave, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table to me. "This is from Emily. She gave it to me this morning to give to you. Just think about what's at stake." I picked up the note. It was on the same creamy cardstock as the invitation. I unfolded it. The handwriting was Emily's familiar looping script. It contained 2 words: "Think twice." Think twice. The words echoed in my head all the way home. It wasn't a plea, it was a threat. I walked into my house and found Lisa in the study, surrounded by textbooks, trying to lose herself in her work. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed, and my heart broke all over again. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please, Alex, don't go to that wedding alone. Don't let them win. Don't let them separate us." She wasn't just asking me not to attend a party. She was begging me not to validate their narrative, not to walk into that room and, by my very presence, agree that she was the problem, that she was the drama they needed to cut out. I sat down next to her, pulling her into my arms, and my mind flashed back to our own wedding day. Standing under that old oak tree, my hands trembling as I held hers. I remembered the promise I'd made her, a promise I'd written myself. In front of everyone we love, I'd said, I promise that it will always be you and me. We are a team. I will always have your back, and I will always, always be in your corner. The memory was so vivid, it felt like yesterday. And here I was, being asked to leave my teammate on the sidelines and walk onto the field alone. My phone buzzed. It was Aaron. "Dude, you going?" I typed back, "I don't know what to do." He called me immediately. "Listen to me," he said, his voice serious. "You're in a no-win situation here. If you go, you betray Lisa. If you don't go, you might lose your brother and your parents for good. You're going to regret this either way, man. You just have to decide which regret you can live with." He was right. There was no clean exit, no path that didn't lead to some kind of loss. Would you honor your marriage or your family name? The question wasn't just hypothetical anymore. It was a choice I had to make right now. I looked at Lisa, at her tear-streaked face, at the strength and vulnerability warring in her eyes. I thought about my brother, about the years of history between us. I thought about my mother's betrayal and Emily's cold, calculated threat. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them break us. But I also wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to let their lies stand unanswered. I was going to go to that wedding. But not as an ally-less guest, not as the brother who had abandoned his wife. I was going with a plan. I was going to walk into that room, look them all in the eye, and I was going to get the real story once and for all. I told Lisa my plan. I told her I wasn't going to celebrate. I was going on a fact-finding mission. I was going to corner Mark alone, away from Emily and my mother. And I wasn't going to leave until he told me the unvarnished truth of what happened that night. She was hesitant, terrified of what might happen, of the rift it might cause. But she also saw the determination in my eyes. She knew I couldn't let it go. She trusted me. The day of the wedding arrived, gray and overcast, a perfect mirror of my mood. I put on my suit, and it felt like armor. Each button was a preparation for battle. Lisa helped me straighten my tie, her hands gentle. "Be careful," she whispered. "Don't let them get in your head." I kissed her goodbye. Door, a long, lingering kiss that felt more like a promise than a farewell. The drive to the vineyard was an hour of white-knuckled silence, my mind replaying every conversation, every lie. When I arrived, the parking attendant directed me to a spot. As I got out of the car, a younger cousin of mine, Sarah, who worked for the catering company, jogged over to me. She looked nervous. "Alex, thank God I caught you," she said, looking over her shoulder. "Listen, I heard what's going on. It's messed up." She pressed a small white envelope into my hand. It was sealed. On the front, in rushed, blocky letters, it said, "Do not open here. Wait." Before I could ask what it was, she scurried away, disappearing into the chaos of the kitchen entrance. I stared at the envelope, a new piece in a puzzle I couldn't solve, and slipped it into the inside pocket of my jacket. It felt like a secret, burning against my chest. Walking into the reception hall was like stepping onto a stage. The ceremony had just ended, and guests were filtering in, finding their tables. The room was beautiful, a rustic barn filled with fairy lights and wildflowers. But the beauty was lost on me. Every head that turned in my direction felt like an indictment. Every smile seemed to have a question mark behind it. I felt every stare like a jolt of static electricity. I saw my parents across the room. My mother's eyes met mine for a second, a flicker of guilt and warning before she looked away. I found my seat at a table with a few old family friends. The small talk was excruciating. They asked where Lisa was. I gave a vague, non-committal answer about her not feeling well. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Why do people smile when their gut says otherwise? The entire room was filled with it, smiles plastered on faces, hiding years of unspoken tensions and petty grievances. It was a masterclass in my family's favorite pastime, pretending. Then came the toasts. My dad gave a standard, heartfelt speech. Then Emily's maid of honor. And then Emily herself took the microphone. She looked radiant, a perfect bride. She thanked everyone for coming, her voice sweet as sugar. But then her eyes found me in the crowd, and the sugar turned to salt. "I'm so grateful to be joining the Carter family," she said, her smile never wavering. "A family that knows the importance of loyalty, of support, and of making sure that special days like this are protected from any unnecessary negativity." The subtext was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife. A few people shifted uncomfortably. A whisper started to circulate through the nearby tables, heads turning in my direction. My face burned with a mixture of shame and fury. After her toast, the music started up, and the night devolved into the usual wedding chaos. I needed to find Mark. I saw him near the bar, finally alone. I started to make my way toward him, but before I could get there, he was pulled up onto the small stage by the DJ. The music cut out. The room went quiet. Mark stood there, microphone in hand, looking out at the crowd. He looked nervous, his eyes darting around the room until they landed on me. "Hey, everyone," he started, his voice a little shaky. I just want to say something. Emily and I are so happy you're all here, but weddings are supposed to be about love, and they're also supposed to be about truth. And there's a truth that's been bothering me, a story that's been told that isn't quite right." A hush fell over the room. My mother looked horrified. Emily was staring at him, her perfect smile frozen on her face. Mark took a deep breath, his knuckles white on the microphone. "There was an incident last year," he said, his voice gaining strength, "and a lot of blame got placed on one person. But that's not the whole story. The person who was really stirring the pot, the one who took a small disagreement and blew it into a catastrophe, wasn't Lisa." He paused, and in that moment of absolute silence, he lifted his hand and pointed. Not at Emily, not at me. He pointed directly at our mother. The silence in the room shattered. A collective gasp rippled through the guests. My mother's face went white as a sheet. Emily rushed to Mark's side, grabbing his arm, whispering furiously at him, but he shook her off. He dropped the microphone onto the stage with a loud thud and walked straight towards me, his eyes locked on mine. My father was on his feet, rushing to my mother, who looked like she was about to faint. The public declaration was a match, and the room was a powder keg. Emily, her face a mask of rage, followed Mark. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, her voice low and venomous for only our small circle to hear. "You're ruining our wedding." "You already did that," Mark shot back, his eyes still on me. "You and her," he said, gesturing towards our mom, "you cooked up this whole story." The private argument was becoming public fast. My mother, recovering her composure, joined the fray. "Mark, you're drunk. You don't know what you're saying." "I'm perfectly sober, Mom," he said, his voice cold. "For the first time in months, I'm seeing things clearly. I let you two manipulate me into icing out my own brother's wife because you were threatened by her." "Threatened?" Emily shrieked, her voice rising. "She called me a gold digger." "No, she didn't," a voice said from behind me. It was Lisa. My head snapped around. She was standing there by the entrance to the hall, her coat still on, her face pale but determined. She must have driven here, must have been unable to just sit and wait. "I never said that," she said, her voice shaking but clear as a bell. She wasn't looking at Emily or my mother. She was looking at me. She wasn't there to defend herself. She was there to protect me. What I said, Lisa continued, her voice gaining strength as she walked towards the group, was that I thought it was sad that you felt the need to pretend to be someone you're not just to fit in with this family's obsession with appearances, Emily. I told you that you were better than that Mark loved you for you, not for some persona you were trying to build. Emily scoffed. That's not what happened. You were jealous. The argument devolved into a chaotic mess of accusations and denials. Old wounds were ripped open. My mother accused Lisa of always looking down on them. Emily accused her of trying to sabotage the wedding from the start. It was a hurricane of emotion, truth, and motive colliding in the middle of the dance floor. Have you ever been in a situation where you're forced to choose who's telling the truth when both sides are so convinced of their own reality? I believed Lisa. I knew her heart. But in that moment, it was her word against theirs. And then, the turning point. Aaron's fiancée, Chloe, who had been standing on the edge of the chaos, stepped forward. She held up her phone. Actually, she said, her voice tutting through the noise, that's not what happened, and I have proof. She turned her phone around. On the screen was a screenshot of a text message conversation. My stomach lurched. It was a message I never thought I'd see. It was a message from someone I trusted implicitly. The screenshot showed a text from my own father to my mother, sent the morning after that fateful party. It read, "Helen, you need to calm Emily down. All Lisa said was that Emily shouldn't let you boss her around about the wedding plans. It was nothing. Don't turn this into one of your dramas." The screenshot hung in the air like a final judgment. My mother stared at it, her mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. My father, who had been trying to fade into the wallpaper, looked like he'd been caught in a spotlight. He hadn't been an innocent bystander. He knew the truth from the very beginning. He knew my mother had twisted Lisa's words, had manufactured this entire crisis, and he had stayed silent. He had let me believe the lie. He had let them exclude my wife. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was never about Lisa and Emily. It was about my mother's control. Lisa's advice to Emily, to be herself, to not let my mother run the show, was a threat to that control. And so, my mother created a villain. She painted my wife as a monster to maintain her position as the family matriarch. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect wedding crumbled into dust. Some guests started to leave, whispering amongst themselves. My aunt was trying to console Emily, who was now sobbing hysterically, not out of hurt, but out of humiliation. My father was trying to lead my mother away, who was alternately denying everything and trying to justify her actions. It was a scene of utter chaos. Broken chairs from the scuffle, whispered alliances being formed and broken in the corners of the room, my brother Mark just standing there, looking shell-shocked at the wreckage he had created. In the middle of it all, Lisa came to my side and took my hand. Her hand was steady in mine. "Let's go," she said softly. And right there, I had a choice. I could stay, I could try to mediate, to pick up the pieces, to salvage some remnant of the family peace, to protect the family name from this public implosion. Or I could stand by my wife, publicly and unequivocally, and walk away from the mess they had created. Would you have stayed for the cake or left with your dignity? Tell me why in the comments. I looked at my mother's tear-streaked, furious face. I looked at my brother, whose marriage had started with a lie that had just detonated. I looked at Lisa, my partner, my team, the person who had been maligned and ostracized, who had driven an hour in the dark to have my back. It wasn't a choice at all. I squeezed her hand, turned my back on the wreckage of the wedding, and walked out of that room without a single look back. I didn't stay for the cake. I left with my dignity, and it cost me more than I ever thought possible. The silence in the car on the way home was heavy, but it wasn't an angry silence. It was the silence of a storm that had finally passed. The phone calls started before we were even halfway home. My dad leaving a furious voicemail about public humiliation. My aunt texting to say she couldn't believe what I'd let happen. My entire family, as I had known it, was dissolving in real time through a series of angry notifications on my phone. By the time we walked through our front door, I knew that family Christmases, birthdays, everything, it was all gone. My relationship with my brother was in tatters. My marriage, however, had never been stronger. It's been 6 months since the wedding, 6 months of silence. Mark and Emily are still married, but from what I hear through Aaron, it's strained. My parents haven't spoken a single word to me. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, if maybe I should have handled it differently, more quietly. But then I look at Lisa, and I know I made the only choice I could. I chose my real family. I learned that loyalty isn't about blood. It's about who stands in your corner when the lights go out. It's about who tells you the truth, even when it's hard. And I learned that some rugs are so full of dirt, the only thing you can do is throw them out and start fresh. We're starting fresh. We're actually talking about moving, maybe a few states away, a clean break. I don't know if I'll ever speak to my parents or my brother again. Maybe time will heal these wounds, or maybe it will just turn them into scars. I promise I'll give you one more update, whether it's about reconciliation or just moving on for good. And for those of you who want to see the proof for yourselves, if you want the receipts, the texts, the full, unvarnished truth, I'll show them to you. If this video gets enough support, I'll post the screenshots my father sent, the deleted messages. Mark, everything. You can see the lies for yourselves. So let me know, did I do the right thing? Drop a straight answer below, no sugarcoating.